So far, it was largely the philosophers who studied human consciousness, but a serious effort to understand consciousness and walk the path towards ultimate reality was made at the MIT World Peace University in the form of the world's first conference on consciousness, the ultimate reality. Many eminent personalities, speakers, thinkers, and philosophers from all over the world share their thoughts on this subject during this conference. The second session was based on matter, mind, spirit, and consciousness. Experienced psychiatrist Dr K.Raghu made an interesting presentation on mind and consciousness.
Most of you people are aware, so I'll just touch a word on this particular slide. There are 5 aspects of the health that we actually look at. Most of the people are only worried about the physical aspect of the health, but that's the last thing to be affected. The first thing to be affected is the spiritual, then the social, then the economical, then the mental, and last is the physical. And most of the people come to us doctors when the last part of the health is affected. Then again, people who are assembled here are quite aware of the different kind of koshas that is there, but very few people actually look at the kind of intervention that they do and in which kosha does it actually work on. So people do go to the gym, go to regular physical activity, now that affects the annamaya kosha. People do pranayama, that affects the pranamaya kosha. If you do reiki, if you do pranic healing, if you do acupuncture, if you do acupressure, all of these affects the pranamaya kosha. Then you have other systems which work on the manomaya kosha. Now meditation, the path that we follow is called as Raja Yoga, modified Raja Yoga. So that works directly on the mind. Then you have the Vijnanamaya kosha where you use that aspect of the mind for the spiritual progress. And the last one is the Anandamaya kosha, which is where you end up after covering all these things. Now, if you just look at the different dimensions of consciousness where the changes occur. So I've just listed a various, almost 17, 18 different types of consciousness where the changes occur in a 15-minute or half an hour session of meditation. Now, not many people are able to recognize all the changes that is occurring, because they are not very sensitive to the changes that is occurring inside. Now, I have not actually listed the biochemical changes, the genetic changes, all these changes I have not listed. I have only spoken about from the point of view of the consciousness, what are the changes. So, there is the sub and super consciousness expansion across the physical, mental and the spiritual realm, expansion of the consciousness across the 5 realms, then expansion of the consciousness across the 8 aspects of the mind I spoke about, internal and external expansion, body, mind, soul and divine consciousness, individual, cosmic, paracosmic and divine consciousness, finite and infinite consciousness, and across many different spiritual points. Now, these different spiritual points can vary depending on the system that you follow. Then the expansion also across the different chakras of the energy body. Expansion, once you start expanding into the super consciousness, then you have access to the different spiritual worlds. Then you have different densities of consciousness and witness versus observer consciousness and different stages of meditative consciousness. And the ultimate question is the consciousness the end of it? Because there are many aspects or many things, literature in our scriptures which says the consciousness is the highest. But in our system, we say that the consciousness is not the highest. You go through these different stages of consciousness, you then go into the seed of the consciousness, which is where it originates. Then you go into the next stage, which is the potentiality of the consciousness. Ultimately, consciousness dwells as a dimension of awareness when you go near the Bhuma. Now, I have just borrowed the word Bhuma from Chandogya Upanishad. So, there is a conversation between Naraka and Sananda. So, Sanaka and Narada, where Narada goes as a student to Sanaka. Then Sanaka explains all these steps. There are 26 levels in which he takes Sanaka to the highest, which is the self. There are only 2 things which are remaining. The ego is refined to such an extent that only identity remains. That's how we are able to communicate with the higher souls who are not in our realm as of now. And then there is awareness. It is through the awareness that they are able to communicate what they want to convey to us. So, identity and awareness are the 2 ultimate things which are left as you go near to the center or the God or the Bhuma. The terminology could be different. Now, in coming back to the topic on hand today, which is the relationship between mental health and spiritual journey. When we started training in psychiatry, we were told about many different conditions, which was very, very similar to what we had read in the metaphysical literature. So we were totally confused whether it's a kind of a higher state of consciousness or it is an actually illness. So over the years, this concept has actually got refined. What we have now come to an understanding is that the spiritual journey and the mental illness, they are actually progress in opposite directions. They are mirror images of one another. It is based on this concept that I am saying with confidence that if you use this particular meditation, even if the person has progressed in the wrong direction as far as the consciousness is concerned, we can bring them back to normal consciousness and then actually start making their journey towards the spiritual consciousness. So, if you just take home the point that the consciousness relating to mental illness and spiritual journey, they are both related to one another. They are in one continuum. One part of the journey you called as spiritual consciousness, other part of the journey you called as mental illness. When you are progressing along spiritual consciousness, your consciousness becomes more and more subtle. When you are progressing along mental illness, the consciousness becomes more and more concrete. In fact, if you want to just go by colloquial example, the first stage of any mental illness is when a person gets attached to one idea or one emotion much more than what they would normally do. Rather than getting it refined, you get attached to that idea, and the attachment, the idea it is attached to, that becomes grosser and grosser, bigger and bigger in the mind. Now that is the first stage of illness of the mind. Now, how do we experience this refinement in the consciousness? If you suppose you go on doing meditation, how do you experience this refinement? There are 11 stages in which you can see the refinement of the consciousness occurring. The highest stage where we have to go as far as the spiritual journey is called as a state beyond the existence, non-existence. The next stage is called as the stage of existence. The third stage is called a stage of awareness. Then below that is the stage of attention, then concentration, then identification, attachment, strong likes and dislikes. The ninth stage is where we normally dwell, where we interact with people, we form samskaras within our system, and that get deposited in the different koshas. Now that is the ninth stage, samskara formation. The 10th stage, where the mind has lost its liquidity, is the stress, and if it goes beyond that into a more solid state, this is just like ice, water becoming ice. So that's what I just mean. The consciousness, which is more fluid in nature, now starts taking the form of ice cubes, and that is where the person starts feeling stressed out and they become indecisive. So there are so many other things that occur. The last one is the irreversible mental state. The reversible mental state is the illness of depression, anxiety, where they do get fully resolved, and the last stage, irreversible stage, is the stage of schizophrenia.